The race to Washington is heating up in the state's first congressional district, currently represented by Republican incumbent Nancy Mace. Joining us now is Lynz Piper-Loomis, Republican congressional candidate for SC-01. Great to have you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Let's dive right in. Is this your first time running for office?
No, I did run for office in Texas. I withdrew when my husband lost his job and we moved out here to South Carolina.
So you've been out here for how long now?
Almost 7 years.
Almost 7 years?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was it about the Low Country that brought you here?
So when I was 13, I visited, and I've always wanted to live here. It's always been a place of home inside my heart. And some of my family, when they came over and founded this country, they lived in Virginia, North and South Carolina, as well as Georgia.
Oh, so you've got some roots that go back some generations, I see. So what was it about running for this particular office that interested you? Why are you deciding to run this time?
Number one, God asked me to do it. Number two, General Michael Flynn, as well as some of the locals, encouraged me to run because I believe in America's core value of sovereignty, our United States Constitution. The people should be elected into office, not someone who represents themselves. And we should hold the power, and we are the solutions to the problems that we face here in America, not the government.
Let's talk about some of those endorsements real quick. So General Michael Flynn, Trump's former national security advisor, is endorsing you, as is Mark Finchem, Arizona House of Representatives, both of which were quite heavily involved, and I think you've been rather vocal about this as well, about the elections and the integrity of the elections. So tell us a bit more about how you felt about the 2020 elections.
The election was stolen, and I know a lot of people just want to stay focused on what happened, which is important. We need to, there's a lot of moving pieces. I've been working on it for over a year with these individuals as well as others at the state and the federal level. But what we also need to do is look at what we're doing moving forward. We need paper ballots, paper ballot reconciliation, paper poll books. I know it's not popular with everyone, but this is really going to be the only way that we can eliminate the some of the issues we've had with the machines. I'd like to see an election season be reduced down to an election day and make it a federal holiday.
Now, the incumbent challenger, Nancy Mace, she was very vocal against the idea that the election was stolen, and President Trump himself following the January 6th incident. So what are your views? Do you align yourself with any of those philosophies, or how would you challenge those philosophies?
So I think that the election, the results of the election should have been sent back to the states. I think that we should have, when our voice and our vote are the voice of the people is at stake, there is enough time. There is something about holding that sacred, and that was just ripped away. Second, January 6th, I was in Washington, D.C. I did not go to the Capitol. What has happened to the prisoners and their undue process? We know for a fact, we've seen our leaders, some that have had a spine, stand up and say, you know, there was foul play there, and I stand behind that because I was there days leading up to that, and I saw busloads coming in. I saw what was happening.
Diving into your platform, so what are some of the main points, some of the main issues that you're running on?
Well, obviously the election, which we covered. I went down to the border. I've spent several days at the border and working with Christy Hutcherson, Women Fighting for America, another endorser. I've seen the rape trees. I've seen lingerie hanging up in storefronts on American soil by port of entry. Women are raped, and their undergarments are hung on trees as trophies. Children are drugged and raped. Their diapers are hung on trees. So we have, and our government knows about it, and we're not doing enough about it. Biden is spending and sending over billions of dollars over to the Ukraine, and our borders are wide open. Why aren't our leaders speaking up more about this?
And just out of curiosity, because some of our local representatives are very vociferous when it comes to things that are happening on a global level, such as Ukraine and other places. But when you talk about the border, if someone says, well, but we're not a border state, how would you argue that point that it affects or doesn't affect South Carolina?
Actually, every state's a border state. We're ranked one of the top in the nation for trafficking. And what's happening at the border is massive trafficking. Women and children and men are sold into slavery. And that's what Trump was doing. President Trump was actually DNA testing, because when they come across as families, they're not families. These children are taken from their homes.
Okay, well, we do need to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about your husband, who's retired military, and also want to hear more about your platform as it relates relates to veterans here in Charleston. We're going to do that in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. We're sitting here with Lynz Piper-Loomis. She is candidate for SC-01, South Carolina's 1st congressional district. She's running up against about 4 other candidates, 5 total, including incumbent Nancy Mace. You have made it very clear that veterans issues are among some of the most important to you. You're married to retired military veteran, Master Sergeant Jeremy Loomis. So tell us a bit more about how you plan to impact the veteran community here in Charleston.
So this is something I've already been doing for the time that I've lived here. I served South Carolina for a 2-year term as an Elizabeth Dole Fellow, advocating for veterans and their caregivers. I was a caregiver to my husband for over a decade until he started walking again. So for the last 16 years, I've been working with our government leaders, the other states that we lived in, and also on a federal level, pushing for veterans to get things taken care of, their benefits, or if a veteran needed a wheelchair, whatever. Our story, my husband fell through every single crack, and so we took what happened to us and found the solutions, and we use those solutions to help others. And so I'm going to continue in that endeavor. We've also trained service dogs for veterans with PTSD, been heavily involved in that community for years, and I'll continue in that endeavor.
Okay, and talking about infrastructure, education, what are your thoughts about the state of Charleston, South Carolina as a whole, and what would you suggest to change to improve?
Absolutely. So parental choice, and right now, and parental rights. I've been fighting against all the mandates, unlike my opponent that's in office right now. I've been against all of those from the beginning, all the mandatory mandates. We have our children being groomed for trafficking. How? Because of the transgender agenda that's in the schools. They're allowing pornography, books that expose different forms of activity. It's horrific. And I wouldn't let my children, that's a parent's choice. It's not the school or the government's job to do that. And so that's the biggest thing. And we need to protect them, and we need to give school choice. But in school choice, that needs to come back down to the state level. We need to remove the entire Department of Education, which I know pretty much every candidate has stated that, except maybe for the Democrats. We need to remove the federal funding. This past couple of years, Charleston School District alone, I think, received over $5 million in COVID funds. That's why they didn't care about the state hammering back at them when they didn't follow the Supreme Court's ruling and Governor McMaster's.
And how about infrastructure? Because South Carolina sure is a popular place to move to, and Charleston in particular. The infrastructure is failing. There are so many developments now and too many people with not enough infrastructure. So what would your recommendations be to improve that, and where would the money come from?
Yeah, so my solution first is to go back to the drawing board. I'd like to scrape everything back to the basics, zero it out. I'd like to see single line legislation, 30-day cooling off period that our founding fathers started with. And so when we take a look at where money's being spent, removing the federal government out of the pockets of things at the state level, and then bringing it back to the drawing board. Where is this money going? Honestly, I've not read every single page, the 1,000-page infrastructure bill, but we need to bring it back to where we can read something, we can see if it passes the constitutional test, and see if it fits the needs here in South Carolina. We have a lot of pay-to-play going on. We've got a lot of money being spent over in transgender studies in Pakistan. We have money going to all these other areas, and we our leaders sign for.
You're talking on the federal level.
Yeah. Because I'm running for federal.
Sure.
So when we see that happening, we have our leaders signing off on this, but then we only see a portion that comes back to South Carolina. They compromise on our Constitution. So we need to go back and zero things back out.
Okay. Well, I think we've just barely scratched the surface here, but we're running out of time. Are you going to be holding any personal appearances, any events that are coming up in the near future?
Absolutely. People can go to the website, lynzysc.com. Also, I have a good-sized fundraiser on May the 5th with Christy Hutcherson, Mark Fincham, and Dr. Douglas Frank.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much, Lynz, for joining us.
Thank you.
We're back after this.